Previously on Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic.
You know, the thing that scares us is this guy, there's a chance he's still out there and doing the same kind of thing, and he's probably, the logical step to contact girls of this age now is through the internet.
Whoever we feel has factors and circumstances that make them an interesting suspect, that's who we'll look at. And we'll go by circumstances and facts. And we always let the facts drive it.
And Torsney is brilliant. This is the guy that brought in Whitey Bulger.
Right.
So if anybody can solve this case, it's him and Spetzel.
It is Thursday, November 1st, 2018. I'm on my way to meet James Renner for an interview with a possible lead in the Amy Mihaljevic case. The weather today is about as dreary as you can imagine, 46, and pretty much sideways rain. So it's a pretty ugly day here in Cleveland, but according to James, this is a potentially huge lead.
One of the things I've been waiting on over the years is about 10 years ago, I found out that Dean Runkle had a storage unit in Vermilion. And
you may have mentioned that once before in passing, but it was not something that you expanded upon.
I went out there and spoke to the manager at the time, and I made him input into the computer that they had my name and number and contact information, because I knew that eventually Runkle was going to stop payment on that storage unit.
Okay.
And somebody was going to get it. And I said, I want everything that's in that storage unit. Well, tell them what you found.
It was a photo album, pretty much, and with a box of books, and yeah, it's a photo album.
There's his car.
Okay, look at that car.
That's a Grand Prix or Grand Am that he was driving at the time in '89. There's the picture. What does that caption say?
I'm the person that you're looking for? Or
I'm the person you've been looking for.
Yeah.
Is that coming out of Dean Runkle?
Yes.
What other reason would somebody have to finish that photo album and on the last photo put, I'm the one you've been looking for?
I am Bill Huffman, and welcome to episode 13 of Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, a Slow Burn Media LLC production. On this week's episode, I will take a deeper look into what James Renner and I discussed last week, and we'll examine the suspect that he believes could have been possibly involved with the disappearance and murder of one Amy Renee Mihaljevic. Now, this has been a subject that has driven a bit of controversy just because of the fact that James has put his name on a suspect and authorities have yet to name anybody as a person of interest. So with that note going forward, please advise that, these are just opinions and they are based on what James has researched over the years. And it's up to you, the listener, to make your own conclusions on whether or not you think this person could have been responsible for killing Amy Mihaljevic. Your number one suspect is...
Well...
and why?
Yeah. So I'll say this. So back in 2000, back in like 2007, 2008, I made contact with a retired FBI agent from Cuyahoga County. And he told me, he's like, look, I've been investigating a suspect, and he's by far the best suspect we've ever had. And he's not somebody that you know about yet. He said, so if you find this guy's name, you're gonna know that this guy's interesting. And when you find him, I can't give you his name, but if you find him, come to me and we'll talk. So I'm like, wow, who is this guy? And, because of my articles with Cleveland Scene and the Free Times, people would email me tips and names of potential suspects. So I'd gather like a dozen of these names every once in a while, and then I'd call them up, and I'd say, okay, is this person familiar to you? And is this the person you're talking about? And I'd just go down this list of 12 names.
You would call the suspects?
No, I would call this retired FBI agent.
Gotcha.
Because he said when you get the name, I
was like, it's like you're calling up the suspect. Yeah. Hey, did you kill Amy? Oh, right. No? Okay.
Although it's interesting how many of them want to talk about it. The fact that they're suspects. You would think that they wouldn't talk to you at all, but most of the majority, they want to talk. I don't know why. So I would call him up and go through these lists of names because he said, if you ever give me the name, I'll tell you it's right, but I'm not going to give you the name. So it's this weird cloak and dagger stuff. So, I did this like 3 or 4 times and it became routine. So eventually one day I'm just reading off these names like it's, the same thing we did every day. Is it this guy? No. Is it this guy? No. Is it this guy? No. Is it this guy? And then he doesn't say anything. And so I say, is it this guy? And he doesn't say anything anymore. And I said, would it be helpful if I looked into this man? And he said, yeah, it would be. So I hung up the phone and immediately really, looked into this guy's case. Originally, it was a student who said, I think you should look at my teacher, Dean Runkle, from Amherst. And so I started looking into Dean Runkle. And
did he have any reason to, like...
He just always had a feeling that that he was involved. That back in '89, when they released the composite sketch of Amy's abductor, this student saw the sketch and he said, "Oh, wow, that's my teacher. That's Runkle." And he told his parents, and he said, "So look into this guy." But a lot of people look like the sketch, But what is it about him that made him so interesting to the FBI? Well, it goes back to those women that were called from, well, they were girls at the time, in North Olmsted, that were called by Amy's killer. And one of the ways in which they were all connected was the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center in Bay Village. And the FBI agent that I spoke to believed that Dean Runkle had volunteered time at the Nature Center and would have been there to see the girls' names and phone numbers on that logbook, and to kind of scope these girls out so that he could call them later and try this routine. And he actually called a woman that Runkle worked for in '87, and she said, yeah, he was raising mice in the back of this convenience store in New London, and he would take the mice, when there got to be too many, he'd take them up to the Nature Center in Bay Village, and they would feed them to the snakes. How's that as an image of a creepy dude?
Yeah, snake guy.
So I looked into his background, and it's very odd. First thing I found was that he grew up about a mile from where Amy's body was found in the middle of nowhere down in Ashland County.
And it is in the middle of nowhere.
It is. And if you're from there, you know that County Road 1181, where they found her body, is kind of the perfect place to dump a body because you can do it in the middle of the night. There's no houses around to see you. And if any car comes along, you're going to see their lights in the distance, and you have a good 3 minutes to get out of there and never be seen. So it's a perfect place. So you would almost have to be from that area to know that.
Yeah, what was it, 2007? Or no, it was 2008 when you and I went down there on the anniversary.
Yeah.
And it is in the middle of nowhere.
What's funny is my memory is...
You don't even remember that?
I don't even remember that, man.
Yeah, so we met at Bay Square that day, and then I followed you down to County Road 1181.
Wow.
And you had a lot going on at that time. I mean...
I'm sure. I think that was around the time I was losing my job or something.
And I was about 5 weeks away from losing mine because I got laid off about 2 weeks before Christmas. No, wait.
That's so funny. Yeah, my memory is shot for anything that's not like the details of these cases.
Oh yeah.
Or luckily the details of my family and kids and things like that.
I have video of it, so if you want.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I actually have to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so you'll be like,
I
gosh, I don't remember that, but I guess I was there.
That's funny. So
Runkle lived, and you
lived right there. And every day Runkle has a compulsion. I believe he has several compulsions, but one of them is running and walking. He has to do it routinely every day. And his route was he'd do these like speed walking, even in the middle of winter, and it would take him down County Road 1181. Mm-hmm. People saw him every day, so he was walking past that body every day.
Think he was a trophy?
I think he was just waiting for somebody to find it, and maybe, and I'm not saying 100%. I want to make this clear. I'm not saying 100% that I know he did it.
Right.
I am saying 100% that Dean Runkle is a dangerous man. And that's because what I eventually come to discover is that he had been investigated by a number of schools for improper relationships with students. He wrote a note to this prepubescent boy that was in one of his classes asking for a blowjob. And this boy was kind of his special right hand, teacher's pet type of thing for a while. It's real creepy stuff. He was originally
grooming.
Yeah, he's grooming. He was originally a teacher in Vermilion, and he taught there for 15 years or so, and then that's where he met this boy that he was grooming. And around the time that boy became an adolescent, when he hit puberty, and kind of cut off the relationship with Runkle. It looks like at that moment Runkle stopped teaching there. He also paid this kid. He put like $5,000 into an account for him. So he quits teaching, and then wanders the country for 2 years. And before he leaves, he tells people that he's dying, that he's contracted this rare disease that he says he got from scraping his finger on a piece of coral.
So he leaves school, and where did he go from there? I mean, did he just kind of disappear?
So he wanders the country for a couple years, ends up working for a time as a ragtime piano player at both Cedar Point, I believe, but he also worked at Disneyland.
And this is where I'll bring up Linda O'Keefe, which is the unsolved murder in 1973 that was reported in Newport, California, which would have been not too far from where Dean Runkle would have been working in Disneyland. And again, that case has been unsolved for nearly 40 years, and we do know that he was living in the area during that time.
So he's constantly always around kids, very good with the ragtime piano. And then he comes back to town, and he starts raising these mice in the back of this convenience store. And going up to this nature center.
How does he end up at Amherst if he's living all the way down in Ashland?
That's where he ends up getting a new job teaching.
Okay.
What's interesting about that is he never actually had a teacher's license. He had originally been hired as a long-term substitute, and then they kept him on. And then Amherst, I don't know if they didn't check through it or what, but they gave him a job teaching science there. Even though he didn't have a specific, he probably had a license to teach, but he never was officially a teacher, through the state of Ohio processing or however it works there. But he's building up, he works for the state, for these public schools, and he's building up a pension, right? And he's 1 year from retirement in Amherst. And they changed the law in the state of Ohio. For the first time, every teacher has to be fingerprinted.
What year is this?
This is, I think, 2003 or 2004.
Okay, so well after.
Well after. And he freaks out. And, he writes to the principal. He's like, I'm not giving... He's like, it's ridiculous that you guys would want my fingerprints after teaching for 29 years. I'm not doing this. And he was so afraid to give his fingerprints that he quit with, 1 year short of retirement. And then and it's at that time that this retired FBI agent starts to wonder if maybe it is him because of his connection to the nature center. And for the first time, he's on the radar of the police, and they start interviewing these girls from North Olmsted. They start interviewing his principal, and people that knew him, and they find out about this kid that he was writing to, with these love letters to, and Runkle disappears. And for months, nobody knows where Runkle's at. And then the FBI get a hit because Runkle pawns, I believe it's a watch, but he pawns something at a pawn store in Key West, Florida.
One of my favorite places.
It used to be. Key West is as far from Bay Village as you can get without leaving the United States, the contiguous United States. He's running from something. He doesn't want to give fingerprints. What is it? Now, the police and the FBI go down there, and they bring him in, and they set him up in the back of this Chinese restaurant. And they ask him to take a lie detector test. And they talk to him for hours, and they try to break him. And he swears, because the key to this is, if he was at that nature center, they believe it's probably him. But he says he was never at that nature center. That's what he told them. He's like, I wasn't there. And Spetzel and a couple other agents, or a couple other police officers have told me that they don't believe it's him because he wasn't at the nature center. Now, I have a dozen of his former students that say he would give extra credit if they would go to the nature center, that he knew about the nature center, that he was down there, that he was feeding the mice to the snakes, that he was connected to that nature center. And so eventually I had to talk to this guy. And on my own dime, I flew to Key West, Florida. And in my mind, I figured I'd never been down there before. Key West is an island. It can't be that big, right?
Little did you know.
Key West is huge.
Yes.
It's like looking for a specific person on Key West is like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yes,
and
it is.
It's terrible. So, but some weird things happened down there. When I first got there, the first place I went to was a Wendy's. And I went in there because I was hungry. I grabbed a sandwich. And I remember sitting in the parking lot thinking, James, this is so stupid. Why did you come down here? You're never going to find him. And it was almost like there was this like darkness, this negativity. Like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. You're wasting your time. You should be with your family. And I'm sitting in Wendy's eating this sandwich. So the next morning, I go up and down the main strip there and trying to find Runkle. And I've got a picture of him I'm showing around. And
walking up and down Duval Street.
Exactly right.
Bumping into all the drunks.
Yeah. And I end up... a couple people said that they recognized him as this. They're like, yeah, he's the guy that plays the ragtime piano for this bar down the street. And I'm like, yeah, that's him. He's the ragtime piano guy. I went there, and he had stopped playing like a couple months before that, but nobody knew where he was. And he had been homeless for a while down there. I knew, and there's a big homeless community at Key West, so
Yes,
I went
there
to the
is.
homeless shelter. And started asking around. They're like, well, if anybody knows people that were homeless on the island, it's Mr. Frisbee. You should talk to Mr. Frisbee. I'm like, who's that? And they're like, oh, it's the guy that, throws the Frisbee on the beach. So I go to the beach, and there's this guy that literally is throwing, he throws a Frisbee, and then he runs and catches it. He plays Frisbee with himself. And
Key
he's
West
Mr.
is an
Frisbee.
eclectic place.
Yes. So I go up to him, I'm like, have you seen this guy? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's my buddy Dean Runkle. And I'm like, do you know where I could find him? He's like, I don't know where he's living, but he's probably at work. And I said, where does he work? He said, Wendy's. So I go back to that Wendy's, which is the first place I stopped at on the island. And he's not there. And I asked the manager on duty, I'm like, what I did was I said, hey, I'm a former student of Dean Runkle's. I'd really like to talk to him. I came all this way. Do you know how to reach him? She's like, oh, honey, I'll look up his contact information in the files. She goes back there, and she comes back, and she's like, this is weird. First of all, he didn't list a phone number. There's no number here, and no address. And he was supposed to work today, but he called off. So like I said, this case, you never catch a break. So, so I go driving, at this point I have an hour before I have to drive back to Miami to catch the flight, or I'm going to miss my flight.
Right.
And I'm like, man, I'm not going to find this guy. So I'm driving around and I come to the stop sign and I'm just frustrated. And, I'm a lapsed Catholic, I went to, Christian Academy but I hadn't prayed in years. And whether you call it a prayer or just a message to the universe or just asking the universe for help, I thought to myself, I said, if somebody's listening and if it's this guy, I've come all this way, help me find him. And I swear to God, at that moment, Dean Runkle walks in front of my car at the stop sign. He's instantly recognizable because he looks so much like the composite sketch.
Even 20 years later.
Yeah. So I quickly go past the stop sign and pull over and park on the side of the road and jump out. And I go, Dean! And he stops and looks back at me, and I jog over to him. And I say, I'm James Renner. And I say, do you know who I am? And he said, you're James Renner. He said, my sister told me that you've been calling and that you might come down here. I said, yeah. So we stood on the side of the road there, and we talked for about 5 minutes. Never in the course of those 5 minutes did he say, I did not kill Amy Mihalovic. And I bluffed him, and I said, because remember, the police believe it was probably him if he was at that nature center, but he swears he wasn't there. That's what they thought. That's what they told me. So I bluffed him. I said, hey, what would you say if I told you that I have in my possession a picture of you with one of your students at the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center? And he thought for a second, and he said, I never told the police I wasn't there. I only told them I don't remember being there. He's built a narrative that allows him not to lie about it, but feign that he wasn't. He was there. He was connected. And if he was there, why is he lying about it? What other reason does he have to lie about it, other than if he was somehow involved? I don't know. So that was the extent of it.
Did you ask him if he killed Amy?
I did. And he just wouldn't say no. I forget what he said, but he wouldn't say no. So I knew that nobody would believe that story. Who would believe that story that I sent this message out and he walked in front of my car? So I had to get proof. So I doubled back and I got my camera, and because at that time he was going to go on his daily walk, but I had flustered him so much he was heading back to his apartment. So I lined up the shot towards where he had to enter, and I would be able to get his face. And I knew I only had like one or two shots to get it, and he comes walking around the corner, and again I yell out, "Hey, Dean!" And he looks up, and I snap quickly. I snapped 2 pictures, and one of them came out, and it crystal clear, no doubt about it. So that's what I showed the police when I got back.
And what did the police say when you got back?
Fishermen pulled the body out of the lake.
Do they know who it is?
Freeform's Cruel Summer is back with a new season and a new mystery.
People are going to start asking questions. We have to get our story straight.
From executive producer Jessica Biel.
The girls are hiding something.
Nothing stays secret in this town for long.
There are 2 sides.
How far do I need to go to prove my loyalty to you? This whole thing was your idea!
To every secret. I need to know what happened.
And what if you don't like what you hear?
Freeform's Cruel Summer. New episodes Tuesdays. Stream on Hulu.
You idiot, don't fly to Florida and question one of our suspects. But the retired FBI agent was very, in his mind, after that conversation, that made it, he was pretty darn sure that it was Dean after that point.
I was actually in Key West 2 springs ago.
Yeah?
Actually went to that Wendy's with the intention.
Was he still there?
No. Do you know where he is now? Is he still in Key West?
He was getting, that apartment I tracked him back to and got the picture, was actually, it's part of their homeless shelter program, because if you're homeless on Key West and you stay out of trouble for a certain amount of time, they'll put you up in an apartment that only supposed to be at for a year while you get yourself on your feet. He'd been living in that apartment for like 6 years by then. So last I heard, he was actually working for the homeless shelter as one of their top people. And this woman, I was contacted by one of his coworkers there. They're like, "You got to hear this." This woman came in and found out he was still living in this homeless shelter, things that he was doing he wasn't supposed to be doing. And she was, by the book, and she took over his office and kind of was showing him the door. And they're like, Dean Runkle was always, he's so nice when he comes in. He's so proper, he said. But there was the one day where he got, this woman did something that upset him. And he said his mask came off and you saw this other thing inside of him that was just this rage monster. And it scared everybody. So, he can fool people for a while, but whether or not he is the one that we're looking for in the Amy Mihaljevic case, I don't know for sure. He's in my top 3 suspects, but he's a dangerous man.
How old is Dean Runkle at this point?
I think he's like in his 60s, but he's stayed fit.
Okay.
He's fit. But we're only on the tip of the iceberg here, about reasons why, it might be Dean Runkle. I mean, there's, he was investigated a number of times, inappropriate relationships with students. He was found in parked cars alone with students. One of the reasons, again, that the police don't really like him for it sometimes is that, they've told me, they're like, look, we know he was into boys. Why would he be into girls too? And what they don't understand is, and what any FBI profiler would tell them is, if the adult's interested in prepubescent boys, there's no difference in his mind between boys and girls. It's only after they hit puberty that they would pick a boy or a girl. In their mind, if they're interested in prepubescent kids, it doesn't make any difference to them. And in fact, we know that a number of girls from his classes have contacted me and said that he used to touch them.
Did you do a FOIA request for his Amherst records?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And was he working the day that she was kidnapped?
I believe he was, but their day ended early enough.
That was what I was always wondering, if there would be enough time to get from Amherst to Bay Square.
Yeah.
And he would fall into the perfect criteria.
He also had keys to that school, so that he could have gone, that he could have been in the school, overnight that weekend. Weirdly enough, he was actually sleeping at the school at that time. And they kind of knew about it and let him get away with it. He had a room attached to his classroom that he would set up a cot and sleep there. Yeah, weird.
Weird guy.
Yeah. I think somebody like this can just compartmentalize, and shut that out. And, one of the ways you can do that is to tell yourself well, I don't remember. I never said I wasn't there. I just don't remember. And so I said, what else don't you remember, Dean? What else are you telling yourself you don't remember? A lot of the people that, when you look for killers, you look for somebody, one way that they can live with themselves is to find other compulsions. Sometimes those compulsions are obsessive exercise, where if you're exercising, those voices in your brain telling you that you're an awful person because you killed somebody, that's one way to get them to go away. Another way is religion. Another way is alcohol and drugs. So that's what you're looking for when you find suspects, somebody that's deeply involved in one of those activities, like Vern Hartenberg, who became evangelical.
Oh, is that what he ended up becoming?
Mm-hmm.
If he's a murderer, how would he be able to be a murderer and a teacher?
Well, whoever took Amy, we know is good with kids.
Okay. This
is somebody that can talk a kid into anything, getting into a car with a stranger. So we know there's that. How can he be a teacher too? I think people like this are really good at compartmentalizing. And I think whoever it was that abducted and killed Amy, I don't think they meant to murder her at first. I don't think they knew what was going to happen. And they wanted to see how it would play out. Maybe they had other ideas of how it might play out and only went so far in their mind as the abduction. I don't think the murder was planned. I think she freaked out, and he reacted out of fear and rage and killed her. That's why I think whoever killed her probably never murdered again, which is very rare. Because I think what we're looking for is not necessarily a murderer, but a serial molester, or, a rapist of some sort. But then you get into these weird coincidences, like the day that the Mihalovics moved into their house in Bay Village was the 30th anniversary of the Marilyn Shepard murder.
The other most notorious Bay Village crime, actually one that spawned multiple television shows and movies.
And it gets a little weirder because, the only real witness to what happened with Shepard's, is it Sam, did Sam kill his wife, Marilyn? Was their son, Sam Reese Shepard, who was asleep in his bedroom next to where she was murdered. Sam Reese Shepard, after the murder, leaves Bay Village, does not come back to town until October 27th, 1989.
No
the
way.
Day that, I swear to God, the day that Amy's taken. He was giving a speech at the City Club that day. At about the same exact time that Amy was abducted, he had come back to town to try to get the police to reopen his father's case. And that news story was kind of buried after that because the leading headline was this other new case that happened in Bay Village, this abduction of this girl. So, yeah, isn't that nuts? Like, those two cases kind of intertwine with each other.
Even the chief of police can see the irony in having two national stories hit a city with a population of just under 16,000 people, and one that is widely considered very safe.
It's rather ironic, isn't it? I mean, we're a community of roughly 15,000 people, yet, you would think it's far more than that. But it really is what we think it is. It's a quiet, safe community, but
bad things can happen.
Bad things can happen anywhere. It's happened, we obviously had our share of homicides and other things happen. But as far as prominent stories, to have two major prominent stories come out of this, place in 60 years, it's kind of crazy. Add on top of that it occurred in a city that is often considered one of the safest in Ohio, where people come to live because of the safety and the good schools and the proximity to the lake, and it's kind of like their little, isolated, secure environment. And then to have something like that happen in that makes it even more abnormal. So I think you put all those factors together, you've got this high level of interest, you've got this high level of, we can't allow that to happen because this is where we feel safe and you violated us and we need to do something about it. So I think all those factors going together are what drives this case and continues it on and motivates people. Plus, again, 10-year-old girl.
Here's Special Agent Phil Torsney on the importance of finding closure for the community.
For Mark Mihalovic and the Mihalovic family, and I think just in general, these cases need to be figured out. You can't ever walk away from these things, even no matter how many years it is, and that's why I feel like I'm privileged to be able to still work on it over these years, and I'll continue to help. If one of these detectives or somebody calls me and asks, wants me to help, I'll be happy to help no matter what I'm doing. And I think almost anybody would be like that on a case like this. And really, the public's a big part of this. And anything somebody knows that could really, they've been sitting on, or it's not an issue, call us and let us know.
I mean, do you feel like Torsney's doing as good a job as he could, or
I do.
Do you feel like there's been progress since your books? I mean, obviously there's more suspects and things have changed. I mean, do you feel like the case is closer to a finish line than it was before you wrote the book?
I think every day gets us closer to the answer. My fear is that, because I know in my heart of hearts that this case will be solved one day. My fear is that it'll be solved after the killer has died and he won't face any sort of justice. I don't want that to happen.
And to reiterate what James has just stated, the fact that we are 30 years away from the actual crime, it is getting close to the point where this individual, this suspect, may be getting close to a possible deathbed confession. I know that Chief Spetzel had mentioned that that would be one of the possibilities for possible resolution within this case. So it is important for the public, if you have any information about this case or about the suspects that you may think are involved, please don't hesitate to call. Special Agent Phil Torsney had this to say in regards to the public calling in tips.
Because if somebody's got something, I don't want them to be, we want to get it, we want to get it.
Yeah.
And little things mean a lot in a case like this. It's a big puzzle, and a little piece could fit into something we already know. We know a lot about what happened, and we have a lot of information about a lot of possible perpetrators and that kind of thing, and we're with science and some of this other stuff, we're trying to make it happen, and we're going to continue to do that.
I did ask Special Agent Phil Torsney how important it was for the public to still provide tips on an old case such as Amy Mihaljevich's, and this is what he had to say.
Just because something's in the media doesn't mean it's correct, and we have information that's the general public doesn't know, and the media doesn't know, and it's in-house here, in law enforcement agencies, the FBI, and the prosecutor's office, and that's why we take information, and we don't want anybody to assume, based on prior publications or media things that have been put out there, that this case, that this thing has been resolved because somebody said it's been resolved or thinks it was this person or that person. We want the information because all that's ongoing investigation. And we could take some new information, not focus on certain areas, and take new information and solve the case that way.
So with all the current news and attention given towards the Amy Mihaljevic case, it was one of those questions that I had to ask, and I've probably played this clip before, but this was Chief Spetzel's response to the question I asked in regards to whether or not we are closer to a resolution today in 2018 than we ever have been before.
That's a great question. It's really hard to say because, again, the cases evolve, right? And cases grow. So they're not the same size as they were back in '89. This case is as big as it's ever been, with more names, more suspects, more interviews, more everything, more resources. So it's hard to say that because there's more resources being involved that we're closer. I can say that we have a better perspective on the case because we, as we analyze it and we talk to people, you get a little bit of clarity, but we're nowhere near having the clarity to solve it without some more information.
As this week's episode concludes, I wanted to play a clip from Chief Spetzel's interview where he discusses what he would say to the killer if he had an opportunity.
Hey, come on in and see me. Come on in, let's talk about it. Here's the thing. I believe that the person who did this didn't necessarily set up this meeting to kill Amy. That's not the way this happens. What I would tell you, what I believe personally, this is my personal opinion, is the person that did this probably set this up because of an attraction to Amy, a sexual attraction to Amy. But what inevitably happens with these is obviously they don't go the way their minds had planned that to go, and all of a sudden it goes awry and they end up killing the child. That's typically how these things go. And I don't think this person's any different. I really believe the person that did this didn't take her with the plan on killing her. I believe that. So I would love to sit down with this person and talk with them, find out what was your motivation, what were you thinking, how did this happen, tell me the story. People want to know. It's about time to unburden yourself and let everybody know what happened.
Amy's killer has remained at large for nearly 30 years, and it is about time that freedom comes to an end. So if you do have any information, please share that information with the Bay Village Police. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode of Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, and stay tuned for next week's episode 14. If you enjoy this independently produced podcast, please help support independent journalism by clicking on the donate button on the bottom left of whokilledamymihaljevic.com. You can also make a donation through the Venmo app with my username @Bill-Huffman-3. Any amount is appreciated, and thank you to the listeners that help keep this podcast going. You can also help support the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that will also help get the show the coverage it deserves. You can contact the Bay Village Police Department at 440-871-1234 if you have any new information. The FBI is also offering a reward up to $25,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for the death of Amy Renee Mihaljevic. Anyone with information concerning this case, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Thank you again for listening, and be safe.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.
Hello out there. Yes, hello out there, everyone. I'm Hal Schwartz.
And I'm Flynn McLean. Together we host None But the Brave, a podcast dedicated to the music and career of Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce and E Street Band are on tour right now for the first time in 6 years, and we're taking a detailed look at what's happening on stage in our bi-weekly episodes.
We've also been recently joined by some very exciting guests, including rock journalist Warren Zanes and Stephen Hayden, Backstreet's Magazine founder Charles Cross, and Barstool's Kirk Minahan.
If you're a diehard Springsteen fan, this is the show for you.
So please subscribe to None But the Brave on your favorite podcasting platform, and we hope to see you further on up the road.
Thank you so much. We'll be seeing you.